As I have said before, I worked in the Huia Valley on the construction of the Huia Dam, the Upper Huia Dam. I spent about 2 years under canvas with the surveyors and got to know the area fairly well, and I was present when they were digging test holes to find out the suitable place to put the big dam. They dug, I suppose, perhaps a dozen test holes of various depth to find good foundations. When they decided upon the best site, they dug down and excavated naturally a big wide area for the dam, and discovered that the old mill workers had put their trip dam exactly on the site where the modern surveyors decided the dam should be. I know that. I saw the log, a great big kauri log which they call a foot log, to hold the rest of the dam, and it had the axe marks were still on it, quite fresh, because it had been perfectly preserved, the water running over it all those years. Approximately 18 inches square, which had been squared by the square axes which used in those days for squaring the logs, because they didn't have planes and so on. And the axe marks were still visible. I would say it was approximately 12 feet long across the bed of the creek, let into the solid stone, so that it had a foundation on which to build the trip dam. The main Neotupu Dam was finished about 1918, just after I arrived here, and then I worked on the roads, as I mentioned before, and then I was employed driving a horse and tram which supplied all the metal to the auxiliary dam at Neotupu. That auxiliary dam holds 70 million gallons of water against 530 of the main dam. When I had finished that job, I was asked if I would like to go to the Huia, and the old gentleman who was the boss at that time lived on the bottom end of Parker Road, where the old people's home is now. He asked me if I would like a job, and I said, yes, all right. This old man was 70 years old, while I was quite a boy. But we used to walk every Monday morning up Parker Road through 5 tunnels, one of them where we used to have to walk blind because we had no lights, but we would be able to pick out path because the water pipe was alongside us carrying the water to Auckland. Then we would go over the Nihotupa Dam, down Christie's Track until we got to the working site. Our camp was at George's Creek, 2 mile up from the Huia Bay. Sometimes my gang would be working down at the Huia Bay, and that would be an extra 2 mile to walk. So we used to walk sometimes 7 and 8 miles a day, and we would work 9 hours a day on the pick and shovel. There were no machines in those days, no bulldozers, any machines. They had one wheel in front, wheelbarrows. And the whole tram road up to the Huia Dam, 4 miles at least, 4 or 6 miles, was built by the men. It's all handwork, pick and shovel and spade and wheelbarrow. Occasionally we had little trucks which ran on light tram rails. Then we put another 2 miles onto that to go up to the quarry, where I worked for 2 years while the construction of the dam was going on. I did not work on the construction of the dam, but my mate, Fred Whittaker, was there for the duration, while my gang supplied the metal. Now regarding the tracks, I spoke of Christie's Track, which was about 2 miles long, leading down from the Nihotupa Dam to George's Creek Camp. The engineers and workers, of course, they wished to have a track where they could get out foot dry. In those days, the only way we could get to Auckland was to walk out until we got to the West Coast Road, or walk down to the Huia Bay and go by launch to Onehunga. So they got me, seeing that I was living fairly handy. I was newly married then, and I lived at Nihotupu while all the rest were in camp, and they gave me a handy job, so I'd be home with my new wife. I was given the job of putting down what they called a corrugated track, made of split pungas about 18 inches long, and I did almost the 2 miles of that so to make a good track for them. Some of the remains of those pungas I think you will still find on that track. Also, the mile from the West Coast Road to the Huia Quarry, I did that also the same way. Joe Smith, he was the stoker and boiler attendant at the Near Tupu Dam, which drove the haulers and the concrete mixer during the duration of that time. Then, when that dam was finished, he was transferred later to the Huia, and he drove the locomotive there for the duration of the building of that dam. Joe Smith was a little Lancashire man, fond of the drink, and the story is told that one time he stayed in the camp long enough to save £80, and he went to town to buy a pair of trousers. He stopped the first pub and got disabled and came back £10 in debt with no trousers. When we were at the Huia, working fortnight at a time, some of the single men, of course, used to stay in there for perhaps 8 or 9 months and grow a beard in the meantime. Then when they decided to go out for their holiday, they'd be clean-shaved in the morning and they'd come to breakfast and you wouldn't know who they were. Provided for our gang, the Waitemata gang, and the city council had about 60 men. There was 80 men living in that camp. We had to walk up from the Near Tupu Valley up to this campsite, so we'd be living outside the catchment area, if you understand, so no police going into the dam. And 80 of us used to be living up there, and there was a cook, Jamaican, and they reckon he was the best cook in Auckland. I mean, he was about 6'6", I think, a great big fellow. And he had one fellow, an offsider, and those two used to cook for 80. And he'd stand at the door. He'd look to be never in a hurry. He'd stand at the door when it was all over, when you're going out. Any complaints, boys?